Paddington in Peru has slid down the banister and into theaters, but does it stack up to the iconic first two films in the franchise? Well, stick around and I'll let you know my thoughts. Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Sean Morgan and I love movies. I also love Paddington Bear. The Paddington films are some of my favorite films of the modern age, and I say that with no irony and not as a bit. I think they are supremely funny, heartfelt, and well made, and the rest of the film community seems to agree with me. Excuse me. The Paddington films being near perfect is kind of a unanimously agreed upon fact in cinephile circles. So many people have been hotly anticipating the third entry in the series, that being Paddington in Peru. There was a lot of pressure on this film to continue the streak of being phenomenal. Paddington in Peru stars Hugh Bonneville of Downton Abbey fame, Emily Mortimer, Julia Walters, Jim Broadbent, Olivia Colman, Antonio Banderas, and Ben Whishaw as the voice of Paddington Bear. It's a pretty incredible cast, and Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas offer tons of goofy fun as the new villains of the series. Banderas, in particular, seems to be having a blast and seems to be going all out, knowing exactly what kind of comedy is required in the moment. I'm not surprised given his level of talent, but it's always a good time to shout out Banderas. He's amazing in this, Puss in Boots, Baby Girl, and anything on his IMDb page. Frankly, you could pick any of his projects out of a hat and say, I bet he's great in that, and you're probably right. Paddington in Peru was directed by Dougal Wilson. This is his first feature film as director, which created some skepticism within film nerd circles out there. The first two Paddington movies were directed by Paul King, who did not return for this third installment as director. He does have a story by credit, though. I'm not sure why King did not return, though it is possible that he is in development on some sort of sequel to Wonka, a film that he also directed and was a massive success. I didn't like Wonka very much, but we don't need to get into that right now. Frankly, we would be here for literal ages for that discussion. That is a film that really kind of got under my skin, and I was excited because I like Paul King. Anyway, I thought Paddington in Peru was extremely solid, but I did think it was the least good of the now trilogy of movies. The first two Paddington films set a very high bar, so for Paddington in Peru to be just great and not amazing feels a little bit like a letdown, but I still had such a wonderful time with this world and these characters, as I always do. I think the inherent kind of sweetness and kindness are still present during this adventure, as is the humor that people have come to expect from this now franchise. I think that one could make the argument that the jokes here lean a little bit more towards being just for kids rather than being for kids and adults both. If you compare like the humor of this film to that of the previous Paddington movies, I think you could make that case, but that's not something that soured me on the movie as a whole in any real way. The movie remains touching, too, in many of the ways that one expects from the Paddington series of films. I genuinely did, if I'm being honest, get a little emotional at Paddington finally becoming a British citizen. That was very cute. And I also still let a few tears go by the end of the movie when Paddington, spoiler alert, finds his original bear tribe, but still decides to stay with the Browns all the way across the pond. There's something that just fundamentally works about these characters and their love for one another and how they interact with this little CGI bear. You can call me soft, you can call me ridiculous for thinking this way, but I do think it's a touch of kind of modern day movie magic that these work so well. I am also not alone, of course, since these movies are much beloved around the globe. Um, as far as performances go throughout this film, I do also want to shout out Hugh Bonneville, who is consistently very funny throughout these movies. I think it's fair that people seem to focus mostly on the villains of this series, since those performances tend to go very big. Hugh Grant, in particular, in Paddington 2, does kind of blow the doors off the entire house. Um, but I think Hugh Bonneville is hysterical in these films, and he's really dialed into exactly the kind of exasperated, dry British humor that is asked of him. He lets a goofy side of himself kind of fly when it's necessary, and I just think he's kind of undersung as far as when people discuss these movies. And I'm not just saying that either because I adore Downton Abbey. I do adore Downton Abbey, but that is beside the point. I stand by my take. He is awesome in these movies. As far as other actors go, there's not a ton of Jim Broadbent in this movie, who is always great, but I imagine either there were scheduling conflicts going on or the screenwriters just could not find a reasonable way to put his character in more of the movie. And in the same boat is the always delightful Haley Atwell, who most people probably know from the Captain America movies. She was also recently added to the Mission Impossible series, of course, but she's definitely underutilized in this movie, in Paddington in Peru, if I'm going to kind of nitpick the usage of various actors. Again, it's very possible that there just was no organic way to use her more throughout the runtime, but she pops up and, with her few lines as a boisterous American business person, she made a splash with me, and I would have totally welcomed more of that and more of her character. And no, it's not just because I love her as Peggy Carter in the Marvel universe and have had kind of a minor crush on her since 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger, but I realistically I can't really find a way in the film to plug her in to more places. Much of it obviously takes place in the titular Peru. Um, so, I will be pretty interested where the series goes from here, since this does feel like a nice little conclusion to the series if they do decide to end with this particular movie. I think that continuing to do more films in this franchise is maybe tempting fate a little bit. Um, any false step will tarnish a great little run of three movies, two of which I think are very securely kind of in their place as modern classics in a lot of minds. But I'm also kind of selfish, so I will watch as much, Paddington stuff as is put out there into the world. I think the character is just very wonderful. I think he is the kind of embodiment of all that is good in the world, but not in kind of an insincere or overly corporatized way. He just rocks. It's just a really fun movie character and a really endearing protagonist. Um, I should also mention that Emily Mortimer is replacing Sally Hawkins as the matriarch of the Brown family. Um, she's good. She's fine. I like both of those actresses, so I can't really say that, one kind of is better than the other, though I had an attachment to Hawkins as being kind of the original person in the role. That is another situation where I'm not quite sure what the problem was in terms of scheduling or disinterest. Presumably, I mean, I would hope that it's not due to some other Wonka related thing. I believe Sally Hawkins also appears in Wonka as, spoiler alert, Wonka's dead mom, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, like I said, it's been a while since I really dove into the Wonka lore. I despise that movie in a lot of ways. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. And the actors playing the kind of teenaged version of the kids in the Brown family, they're also fine. Not each of them gets kind of like a little story beat and a little arc, which was nice. Um, but I wouldn't say that either of them makes a huge splash, which is fair, as I think most people who go to these movies are going for the titular bear and for some great kind of wild villain performances. Uh, I kind of spoiled earlier that Olivia Colman is kind of a secret second villain to the piece. She's pretty funny. Antonio Banderas is going a lot bigger, but it's hard not to kind of laugh at Olivia Colman when she's doing her thing. And she is intentionally kind of doing some subterfuge here and there. And I thought her presence was really fun, particularly because the last kind of villain role I saw her in was a Marvel's Secret Invasion, or she's not a villain in that series per se, but she can certainly be seen as an antagonistic force. And I think that series really used her to not her full power, I should say, if I'm being nice. But that series unfortunately fails in a lot of ways. And I'm a big Marvel nerd, so that was really kind of a bummer. Anyway, I saved $10.99 by seeing this movie with AMC A List. I note that because I am going to try to tally the savings I made with A List at the end of 1 year to see how much I actually shaved, excuse me. No, I'm going to see how much I actually saved with AMC A List. I'm not sponsored by them, but I just think that's a kind of a fun experiment to do. Anyway, where would Paddington in Peru rank on my scale of A List? Amazing, average, abysmal, or needs to be abolished? Well, if the first two Paddington films are A-list films, which I think that they are, and this one is just beneath it, I will be giving Paddington in Peru an amazing rating, so kind of a gentleman's 4 out of 5, like a pretty soft 4. Like, I think it's great. and it doesn't have any real problems with it. It's a wonderful family film with a lot of heart and humor, and it continues the story of the Browns and Paddington in a satisfying way. If you liked the first two movies, I highly recommend that you book your ticket to Peru with this hat wearing bear. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like this video or subscribe to the channel. You can do one of those things. You can do both of those things. You can do neither of those things too, whatever you like. Feel free to comment down below as well to tell me if you saw Paddington in Peru, and if you did, what you thought of it. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And where would you rank it in your personal tier list of the series? I'm curious to know if anybody on Earth has it at the very tippy top. That seems like a crazy take that not a lot of people probably have, but I'm sure that person exists out there somewhere. Anyways, until next time, thank you so much for watching, and don't trust any nuns played by Oscar winning actresses. Bye.